to his second son, Onan. And it was customary for if a husband died childless, that his widow would be married to the next son and then provide a heir. Onan, though, had sinned before the Lord, and to avoid his obligation, and so the Lord slew him. At this point, Yehudah was reluctant to give his third son to marry Tamar. So he told her that he would give her to Shelah when he came of age. After realizing that Yehudah was not going to fulfill his promise to give his son Shelah to her in marriage, Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute and seduced Yehudah himself. Yehudah heard that his daughter-in-law had become pregnant and ordered her to be burned alive for harlotry. But when Tamar produced the pledge of payment for her services, he publicly confessed that he was the father. Tamar gave birth to twins, Zerah and Perez, who was an ancestor of King David, and through him, our Messiah Yeshua. And it's fascinating through this lineage that we see the line of Lot with his daughter that led to the birth of Moab, the ancestor of Ruth, and the great-grandmother of King David. We see that the union of Yehudah and Tamar led to the birth of Perez, from whom King David came, the union of David and Bathsheba. After this account of Yehudah and Tamar, the Torah portion resumes with the saga of Yosef, who was sold to Potiphar. Despite the injustice and treachery of his brothers, the Lord was with Yosef and blessed everything that he did. In fact, soon he was promoted to be in charge of Potiphar's entire household. The Torah describes Yosef as handsome in form and appearance, and soon Potiphar's wife began soliciting him to have an affair. Yosef steadfastly refused her repeated advances, but one day she threw herself on him when no one was in the house. When Yosef tried to flee, she grabbed his garment and pulled it off. Humiliated and defeated, she then decided to slander Yosef and accuse him falsely of attempting to rape her. Potiphar was understandably outraged and threw young Yosef into the royal dungeon. But again, God showed him favor, and he immediately gained the trust and admiration of the jailers, who appointed him as a position of authority in prison administration. And whatever he did, the Lord made succeed. The Parsha ends with the events of Yosef's life that eventually would bring him to the attention of Pharaoh himself. While in prison, Yosef met Pharaoh's wine steward and chief baker, both incarcerated for offending their master. Both men had disturbing dreams that Yosef correctly interpreted. In 3 days, he told them, the wine steward will be released, but the baker would be hanged. Yosef then asked the wine steward to advocate for his release with Pharaoh. Yosef's predictions were fulfilled, but the wine steward forgot all about Yosef and did nothing for him. Our Haftarah reading in Amos sees him as a shepherd when he is called by God to be a prophet sometime during the reign of Jeroboam II. The northern kingdom of Israel was very prosperous at the time, and wealthy. They lived in palaces and behaved like non-Israelites, while the poor were exploited and sold into slavery if they could not pay their debts. The leadership of the people was entirely corrupt, and Amos was called upon to express God's anger at the Israelites, who were no longer living by the mitzvot, the commandments of Torah. In this Haftarah portion, Amos's prophecy against Israel is the climax of 7 preceding reproofs directed against the various surrounding nations. His prophecy opens with the formula, "Thus says the Lord," for 3 transgressions of Israel, Even for 4, I will not revoke it. Amos railed on the judges of Israel for their willingness to take bribes of silver, thereby repeating the crime of their brother Yosef, selling the righteous for silver and the poor for a pair of shoes, Amos 2:6. The connection to the Parsha is given by the Jewish sages by means of Midrash. After throwing Yosef in a pit, his brothers decided to sell him for 20 pieces of silver, 2 pieces per brother, beginning with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, then through Yehuda, the son of Jesse, the father of King David, and finally from David to Solomon. Matthew does this in order to demonstrate that Yeshua is indeed a descendant of King David and therefore eligible to be the Mashiach of Israel. I will be reading today the first 7 verses of Parsha Vyashev. Please follow along.